Bam! We have a plan for the Camaro, and it is going to become a drift car. So it may or may not be what a lot of people want to see with it, but in my opinion, there is a complete void of information about drifting F-bodies out there, and I think I just so happened to buy the perfect car to turn into a drift car. More than anything because there's quite a few miles on it, the quarters are all dinged up already, every body panel's got some damage on it, and you know, the reality of this is, it's never going to be a show-worthy car. I just can't see anybody putting the time and money into it. Everything on here has been touched, it's been modified, it's already been beat on, and I got it for a good enough price. So maybe some of you guys will disagree with it, but I've already got a car that I do autocrossing and some road race type stuff at Power Cruise every year at Brainerd. And I have a lot of fun with the Trans Am, but it's far too nice to go drifting with. If I munched that thing into a wall, I'd want to cry. So being the damage is pretty much done on this one, it's a pretty good looking car, and I really like that about it because it's going to show really well, and it's going to be a decent representation of an F-body out there. But more than anything, it's already got most of the drive line you'd want in a car to go drifting with. I mean, as you all know, most people LS swap them and put a T56 in it. This already has both of those. It still has the factory 10-bolt rear end in it, but I do have a way that I'm going to try and help that last and how to initiate drifting with it until I get better at throwing the car on and whatever, because this is completely new to me. So you guys are pretty much going to be coming along for the ride with me as I learn how to do it with a couple of my friends that are really good at it. So I'm getting a bunch of advice on things to buy so far, but I've got a decent plan in place on how to make this more than anything last, because I don't want to be tearing up engines and transmissions and rear ends. So hopefully the driveline will make it all through next year. We can have a lot of fun out sliding around and burning up some tires. So the first thing to address on this car, because it does have a sordid history, is like anything you're doing, you got to be sure about the brakes on it. A while ago, all of the planets aligned, and I was shot an email by carparts.com, and they are the sponsor of today's video. They've supplied all of the braking parts that I'll be using on the car, including the Powerstop front and rear drilled and slotted disc brakes, as well as the Powerstop carbon fiber ceramic brake pads that I'll be using on the front and back of the car, as well as the rear hydrobrake setup. In a future video, or the next video in the series, I'll also be installing 2 factory LS1 rear calipers in a dual caliper configuration. So I hope you guys are excited and you're going to come along for the ride. With over 25 years of experience and over 50 million products delivered, carparts.com has streamed their online website and sourcing network to better serve the way that drivers get the parts they need. Using the latest technologies and design principles, they've created an easy-to-use, mobile-friendly shopping platform that, alongside their own national distribution network, cuts out the brick-and-mortar supply chain cost and provides quality parts at a budget-friendly price. Carparts.com is the smart way to get the right parts at the right price to get your car back on the road. Carparts.com designed an online experience for mobile, making it easy to buy any parts, anytime, anywhere, giving drivers a parts store on demand. At carparts.com, they stock their own inventory so they can pass the savings on to the customers. Carparts.com, right parts, right now. So all of the rotors and pads and everything in today's video are from Powerstop, but they were provided by carparts.com. So big thank you to them. In the next video, you'll see a couple more parts that you might get a glimpse of in this video for the rear of the car. But for now, we're going to be going over those 2 things, and there'll be more on the other stuff in the next video. So big thank you to carparts.com for making this video possible. But let's get right into today's video. Tell you what, these wheels have got to be on here at like 200 pound-feet. Man. Oh my God. You know, I've maintained over the years that some folks probably shouldn't just have tools. That's like most of my weight, and I'm about 200 pounds. I think these are about 80 or 100 is what they recommend wheel torque on an F-body. I mean, yeah, whoever put them on, they may have over cinched them a little bit, and even this one's tight. It's still tight. Had the extension on to stay away from the paint a little bit, but I think you get the idea. This is going to be my experience for just cracking them loose. I'm glad I remembered to do this before getting it in the air. Alright guys, so far what I'm seeing after looking at the car with it up in the air and everything is kind of what you'd expect. Everything looks decent, it just, it's getting worn out. So these pads are pretty much on their last legs. Any hard driving or another year or so they'd be shot, and the rotors are starting to rust and corrode through on each outside area where the pads don't contact it. It's the same story for the front. Everything's pretty straight in here. I think that's an Eibach lowering spring in the front and back. If you guys have any idea what it might be, otherwise let me know. I don't see any markings at all on it, so whatever it is, it's got lowering springs in it. But everything seems pretty good on this thing. I think we got a good starter here. So far I'm pretty happy. Everything came together real nice. And now that I got it up in the air and the wheel well's exposed, I'll start hammering away on this fender too, because as you know from prior videos, this thing is gacked. But like anything else, don't let a little bit of damage and mileage scare you away from something that you might otherwise have a lot of fun inside of.
That's what she said.
What I see here on these shocks, it's Stag damper technology. I honestly have never heard of Stag, so I'll do a little bit of homework on that, but it's got Stag struts in the front, so if it's good or bad right now, I'm ashamed to say that I have no idea. But at any rate, I'm gonna get working on the brake job. This is pretty straightforward as it's standard maintenance on most vehicles. It has disc brakes front and rear, so this is pretty easy. I'll get something to hang up these calipers and I'll get cranking on it. I'm hoping to be done here probably in the next hour. So unlock it, and I'm gonna turn it so I can access the 18mm caliper bracket mounting bolts real easy. Kind of like giving it a pound there if it's seized up. It seems to break all that corrosion and dirt and whatever loose pretty easy. So that one's tight too, but a lot of people use electric tools like a electric ratcheting wrench or impacts or whatever, but I've had really good luck with hand tools for the most part. So some instances it's a lot slower and you don't have the horse pressure to actually do it, you know, obviously, but in this case it's working out pretty good. So this is really good maintenance to do yourself, especially if you can throw in a little bit more cash at it and get a really good upgrade while you're in there. Alright, so got the caliper all supported. Take a rotor off here, and it's a good time for me to actually start cleaning up in here a little bit. Alright, I just wanted to show you guys real quick that I did clean up everything a little bit with some brake cleaner in here. A lot of it's just corroded, so without blasting and painting, it's just going to look like it is. But the Powerstop pad kit actually comes with new guide brackets for each side of the caliper as well as the center one. It also comes with a little bit of brake guide lubricant. So now that everything's all greased up, the slides look really good in there. I took the caliper open and took a look. They're all greased up and moving free. So I'm going to leave those be. They seem to be working fine. So I'm pretty much ready to install the pads. I'll put a little bit of anti-seize here just so we don't get into a seizing situation. A little dab will do ya, and yeah, I'll be about ready to put the car back together on this side. I'll do the same on the other side, but you pretty much get the idea. A couple 18mm bolts, you get your caliper free, put your new guides in, and you'll be ready to rock. Alright, now that assembly is all done, you want to make sure you torque your bolts just like on anything else. And the spec for these, the caliper bracket mounting bolts, not the guide pin bolts, is 74 pound-feet. should be done. These will free up a little bit after some driving. There's no vacuum, of course, and I may have not had the caliper pistons fully compressed, but so far so good. Everything's nice and straight. We're all lubed up. Things should move freely, so. All right, so the first half of the brake job is done. Well, I'll call it first half, and I'm also gonna be bleeding the brakes and getting fresh fluid everywhere because I'll be doing that anyways for the rear hydro setup in the next video. But yeah, pretty happy so far. Everything looks real good. It is as typical of a brake job as you can do, so you could do a little upgrade like this while you're doing your regular maintenance. There's a little bit of back and forth to talk about in the comments as far as whether you prefer a blank, a slotted, a drilled, or a drilled and slotted rotor as these are, and there's actually a lot of debate back and forth on that. So drop your thoughts below. What do you think the best style of rotor is for a car like this, or one that's going to be autocross like this car that has slotted rotors? Who knows? Maybe you guys will vote blank. I don't know. I'm not real partial to any one particular type. I'm going to try these out and see how they hold up, but so far people seem to really like the Powerstop stuff. So I'm going to give it a shot, and on that note, I will continue to the back of the car where the brakes are pretty much in the same shape, and we're going to have a very similar process. I'll just make sure everything's moving freely, and I'm not going to have to replace any calipers, etc. And I think while I'm in here, I'll probably try and get that rear dual caliper bracket on and start that process. So let's get cranking on the rear of the car. So these bolts here are a 15 millimeter. And I am going to need a shallow socket. There, that's better. As always, force is the magic. I'm gonna injure my hand. Okay, I've got my ocular safety apparatus on now, and I'm gonna do what you shouldn't do. Hit your ratcheting wrench with a dead blow hammer. Look, it didn't break. Can you believe it? The naysayers would fire you for that. Looks like there's KYB shocks in the back here, so they put something in the front that does not match the back. The other thing that I noticed immediately when buying the car is that the lower control arms have been replaced, but because the car is lowered, it would require lower control arm relocation brackets, and they, for whatever reason, elected to not buy them. So the angle of the rear lower control arms is totally wrong. It's actually angled down towards the body of the car. So just one more thing to consider while I'm doing all this is I'll have to look into getting those fixed up too. There, not like many things, do as I say, not as I do. Oh boy, that is a master class in tomfoolery. So, the parking brake shoes look pretty good. No need to replace them, and I do think this is an excellent time for me to install my dual caliper backing plate. So, I'm going to fiddle with this a little bit and figure it out. There's no instructions for it, so I will report back when I get this figured out. But I'll be doing a little bit of this off camera. I want to get it right the first time so you guys aren't along for a confusing journey. Okay, so after doing a little bit of looking and sizing things up, the kit comes with 2 dual caliper brackets and 2 caliper bracket bolt mounting deals. Anyways, if you look at your rear end, your front, if you look at the driver's side, there's a brake caliper bracket that sits somewhat like this. What we're going to do is add one to the rear of the vehicle like this. So you can see your axle tube here, your 4 mounting bolts for the backing plate as it would be. And when we're done, we've got some new bolts right here that is going to hold a new caliper and caliper bracket to. So what I think I need to do is take loose the 2 bolts here, and I will show you if you'll follow me on this journey with my fingers. I'm going to take loose the 2 behind here. As you'll see them, I'll have to get tricky with a wrench in there. One there, and one down lower. It's a little bit harder to see. Oh, there it is down there. So you see the 2 bolts to the right. I'm going to take those loose by taking the nut off back of each side. And what I'm going to do is put that plate back there and see that the mounting ears should line up approximately with where the factory caliper bracket actually bolts up. So when we're all done, I think I'm going to have the nuts kind of facing to the inside, and I will have the two tangs hanging right here. So I'll have a caliper here and a caliper there. So I'm going to get right to it. It's a little bit of experimentation, but I'm going to show you what I figure out after messing with it for a little while, and I'll see if this is the recipe for success or not. I might have to do a test fit with the calipers and, you know, the rotor and whatever, but this is pretty straightforward. So I'm going to get after it, and hopefully I won't be messing around too long. But it makes sense to do it now instead of doing the brake job, or the perceived brake job, then going back in and doing it later. Alright, so a little while later, and after some troubleshooting, and I actually had to give John from Duncan Motorsports a call to make sure I'm doing this thing right, getting it set up as it should be. I believe that this is how the caliper brackets are supposed to be mounted. Now, I removed the backing plate, or the dust shield for the brakes. That has to be removed because I was running into a little bit of a clearance issue with the new caliper actually contacting the rotor as it rotated. It was the caliper was sitting too far inboard. What I think was happening is that these two welded nuts were actually hitting the dust shield, and it was taking the bracket and pushing it out, if that makes sense, bringing the caliper closer to the rotor and thereby contacting it. So at this time, I believe this to be correct, and what I am waiting for is confirmation. But if it's in the video, this is actually how it's supposed to go. You don't have to pull the axles to do anything like this, but you will have to pull your parking brake retaining clip up here, of course, and whatever else associated to the backing plate. But I think of it about the halfway point here for the rear brake job on this side. It's going to be the exact same on the other side. I'll be putting the welded nuts to the inside and reusing the factory 4 bolts and hardware and whatnot that's associated with the hydrobrake. So I mocked it up real quick, and the rotor and caliper and everything fit and clear. It'll really tell the tale when I get pads and stuff on it, but that'll be a battle for the future. So I think for now, everything is fitting pretty good. So I'm going to snug everything down now, make sure we're secure, and I'm going to finish up the brake job on this side, and I'll probably even mount the caliper and pads here, because in theory, I shouldn't have to come back in here. So I'm going to keep on keeping on with this side of the project, and I'll show you guys an update when I find one or get to a point that's worthy of sharing. Okay, so off camera real quick, I did install the pads and I greased the caliper slides and everything. These calipers do come with the brackets, or what I would like to guess call pad brackets or retaining clips, whatever you might want to call them. It does come with all 3 new ones, so you don't have to worry about buying them. It also comes with the copper crush washers for installing your Banjo bolt, but it does not come with a bolt. That's one thing I actually overlooked, so I'll have to run to the parts store and grab one of them, the correct one for each caliper. Maybe I'll have to order them, I don't know, but at any rate, if you get the pads and the calipers, these are 99% complete as you order them. So I'm going to go mock this one up on the driver's side. I'll make sure that everything fits and spins and clears and all that, and I guess we'll see what we got after doing this little bit of a mock-up. Alright, so after some fighting, swearing, thinking, and pretty much just making it work, the bracket seems to align up like 90%. Now, when you look at the brackets when you get up, they're perfectly straight. Okay, if you can picture the straight bracket with the nut welded on it, they're straight. What you really need to do is take it and bend it a little bit away from the center of the body. So now I've actually got this kind of motion out of it. You know, it's perfect. But before I bent it a little bit, it was bound up on the rotor with this pad here. So you're kind of going to have to envision what I was dealing with, because you may encounter the same thing. But I mocked this rotor up perfectly flat. I ran all the lug nuts down with my little 3/8" impact driver, so I know that my rotor is sitting flush on the axle hub. There was no problem with this brake caliper, new pads as you'd expect. I mean, there's new pads, but there's just that very minimal drag. You get a little noise, but it's not dragging. But right now, I've got this thing just about perfect. What I ultimately had to do was take this pipe wrench and wedge it between. I had to take a pipe wrench and wedge it between way up here on the, well, it should be a bump stop, and the caliper right here on the face of it. And I just sat under the car, and I pulled it really, really hard under the car, because I was bending that bracket just a little bit, but it was enough to make this actually sit perfect, and now it spins fine. Whatever the case, that's my one takeaway on it, is I need a little bit of tweaking, but That's stuff to be expected, especially when you buy stuff without instructions. But as far as I can tell, there is zero other way to mount those brackets, and I haven't heard back from the fellow that made them, so I'm just gonna have to assume that that's exactly how to mount them. There is no other way, orientation for those bolts, caliper mounting brackets, or what have you, to go that makes any sense. So, a little bit of info. The factory mounting bolts for this caliper bracket on the forward side, or what would be your regular pedal brake, is a 15mm. These are actually larger 18mm bolts, similar to used on the front of the car. So a little bit heavier duty stuff on the back of the car, but that's it for the back of the car. I'm gonna go to the other side, do the exact same thing, and that'll wrap up the brake portion of today's video. Quick note, I was a little bit bummed out about taking those dust shields off of the back of the car. For no particular reason, I guess, but as far as I can tell so far, you're still going to be able to retain your parking brake. I don't think the dust shield has anything to do with its alignment in there. And you keep the upper alignment clip, I guess, and it still sits in the star adjusters in the bottom. So I'm pretty sure because it sits inside of that rotor, you're going to be able to retain your parking brake 100%. It just does not fit with that dust shield. That's my takeaway on it so far. We'll go over the rest of the hydrobrake install in the next video. But yeah, I'm gonna go over to the other side of the car, and I want to finish up this install tonight, and I'll round up this portion of the repairs and upgrades. Here, of course, is another factory brake setup. Gonna get this all taken apart, cleaned up real quick, and hopefully now that I've got this all licked, in the next hour or so, I'll be done. It's taking a little longer than I hoped, but we're getting pretty close. So I will show you guys this side when I'm all done. Well, there you have it, part one of the installation video of the front and rear Powerstop brakes and hydrobrake kit is now in the books. This side took probably a third as long, and actually this bracket fit perfect, so I would suspect that something was a little bit amiss with my vehicle. If not, I have a one-off hiccup with the bracket. I don't know for sure, but it took a little tweaking to get the driver's side to be perfect. This side bolted right up, and well, it's getting tighter the more brakes that I add, but it seems to be spinning pretty free considering there is 4 brake calipers dragging on it at the moment. So I'm pretty happy with how this all turned out. In the next video on this car, I'll be going over bleeding the entire brake system because the fluid in here is pitch black, and that is going to be unacceptable now that I did all new brakes on the car. So we're going to make sure we've got our best foot forward with braking, and after that, I believe I'm going to get to the rest of the hydrobrake install, which I have got inside of this box right here. But that's about all I got for today's video. I'd like to thank carparts.com one more time for sponsoring today's video. Without them, there would not be new brakes on the entire car. Not only that, they supply the rear calipers for the vehicle as well. And if you want to check out any of it and pick some up, you can do the same thing to your car with these parts in your garage. So, I'll see you guys in the next video.